Hello, everyone. My name is Allison Dennis. I serve as Executive Director for the Sitka Center for Art and Ecology, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to tonight's resident talk. Sitka is located at Cascade Head on the north central Oregon coast and resides on the unceded traditional lands of the Indigenous people now represented by the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians. There is much to learn, and just one way to engage. I encourage you to visit the Grand Ronde Chicxulub Museum and Cultural Center this year. And now it is my pleasure to introduce the first of tonight's residents. Callum Angus is the author of the story collection, A Natural History of Transition, which was a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award in Transgender Fiction, the Edmund White Award for Debut Fiction, and an Oregon Book Award. His work has appeared in Joyland and Orion, among other publications. He has received fellowships and residencies from Lambda Literary, Signal Fire Foundation for the Arts, the H.J. Andrews Experimental Forest, and the Seventh Wave, among others. He lives in Portland, Oregon, where he is at work on a novel and edits the literary journal Smoke and Mold, which publishes nature writing broadly defined by trans and two-spirit writers. Last year, Callum moderated my personal favorite online reading conversation that Sitka has hosted with recent Sitka resident and writer Morgan Thomas. You can find it on our YouTube channel, and you should check it out. It really is just a joy to listen to. Tonight, however, Callum is with us. So please welcome Callum Angus to the Sitka Center.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Some I know, many I don't. It's a delight to be here and to kick off this resident talk, which is slightly ironic as I am currently in Portland, but will be at Sitka starting November 23rd. So excited to be here speaking with you all. I'm going to and continue Allison's trend of many thanks. Because I want to start out by giving thanks also to the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde community of Oregon, which includes many of the tribes listed in this image, the Multnomah, Tualatin, Clackamas, as well as many others, and to the Confluence Project, which is a large-scale land art project that stretches along the Columbia River and includes work by Maya Lin, work by historians from the Grand Ronde, as well as many other partners, and has continued to inspire my project, which I'm going to talk a little bit about today. But before I do that, I also want to acknowledge just the immense torrents of pain and suffering that we've been watching pour out of Palestine in the last month. It has been extremely difficult, I think, for all of us to watch that, and just want to hold some space in a brief moment of silence for that. Thank you all. I find that really healing. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about my novel in progress, The Chlorophyll Library. It's difficult to decide what to squeeze into 10 minutes when talking about a novel, especially one which I'm looking forward to spending more concerted, quiet time at Sitka to continue working on. So I thought I would start with a couple images that have been inspirational to me before moving on to some questions that are currently swirling in my mind about this novel. And then I will read just a few minutes from a section that was recently published in the Michigan Quarterly Review, titled The Chlorophyll Library. So that's what you have to dive in with me here. And this first image, or series of images, is actually a bird blind that was designed by the architect Maya Lin as part of that Confluence project that I mentioned earlier. And when I first found this bird blind, which lies out in the Sandy River Delta Park, just outside, about 15 minutes outside of Portland, I was really stunned and awed at the beauty of it, but also very confused, right? Because I think when we think of a bird blind, we think of a place or a structure that allows us a clear view of the birds without them being able to see us, right? Something through which you can point your binoculars and count the birds or figure out what species you're looking at. But this structure is a little different And this is kind of looking at it from below. It's cantilevered about 10, 15 feet off the ground. And it just sits in the woods like this. It's an oval open to the sky that is maybe 10 feet in diameter at the longest. And however, once you're in it, it sort of looks like you're in this open roofed jail cell because there is no clear view to the outside. There, you are only confronted with these thin rails of wood around the whole thing. And then you can see here in this image that each slat, I guess you would call them, features the name of a species that Lewis and Clark listed in their documentation of their journey west. Sandy River Delta Park is a location, a verified location where Lewis and Clark did land and spend time in journal entries, which is where Myelin got all of these species names from. They write quite extensively about this area and the animals they encountered there, as well as the people they encountered there, primarily Chinook native peoples. And I find this blind to be not only a beautiful structure, but an interesting play on words, right? For how, if you're in this thinking you're going to look at birds out in the world, you're kind of instantly frustrated by all of these slats of wood through which no binoculars can peer. You can't really see anything outside of this blind once you're inside of it. And of course, there's the wordplay going on with the word blind. But I think deeper than that, when you have these slats of wood in front of you and you can only look at the words that European settlers and early colonial settlers would have applied to the land in English, you're kind of inside this microcosm of what that naming and that violence and westward expansion did to our perception of the land as white European settlers, in that we could not see, we literally could not see past our misconceptions, past our histories that we brought with us to the land itself and how the Chinook peoples and others were engaging with it. And so I first found this blind years ago now when I first moved to Oregon, which was about 6 years ago. Um, and it stuck in my mind and has kind of been this little grain of sand in my creative process, and I keep returning to it. And I wanted to bring it up as I sort of share with you a little bit about my novel, The Chlorophyll Library, and some of the subjects and questions that it's brought up for me. So on the right-hand side, there's a quote from an author named Daniela Casella from her book Chimeras, and she writes, "I long for a type of hearing that is reading, that is writing, attuned to detect other faint voices, those who will not ever become loud enough, because if they do, they get distorted and lose texture." This idea of writing and reading as a way to listen to the quietest voices, to the voices that are smothered under other names, other histories that we can't hear. I remain really interested in that. And The Chlorophyll Library is becoming a novel that is in the process of decay. And that's been kind of one of the major animating questions of this project, in that if you kind of imagine building a sandcastle, right, that is being slowly and washed away by the tide, how do you build something like that? How do you build or write something that is slowly in the process of breaking apart? Do you build up a structure and then decay it from the outside? Do you try to involve decay in the center? What do you do? And so I don't really have an answer, but so far, some answers that I've gotten, which are also in the form of other questions, are a pleasurable sensation of being lost, and also making sure not to separate out the answer from the question, the literal from the littoral from the litter. Other questions that have come up for me: how do you write a character who can't imagine a future for themselves, right? If they're inside a novel that's decaying, how do they act? How do they plan their lives around a future that no longer exists? Something that I think a lot of people can relate to now. How do you know when something is gone? And how do you know what or whose story you're in? So I'm going to read to you. I think the best way to kind of show you how this is operating in the chlorophyll library is reading to you from it. I'm just going to read like 2 pages or so. Here we go. Inside the chlorophyll library, there were no plants. There were also no euphemisms. From the very beginning, the library took its name not from a greenhouse resemblance, but from the unique process that happened between readers and books on its shelves. We spent many years inside the grain of wooden tables, a crust on the windowsill, between the grout of bathroom tile, watching. It's possible we are the only ones living who can tell you now about the library and the subsequent nearly unbelievable events it sparked. So you'll forgive us if we spend a little time building its walls back as we remember them. Age makes us a tourist of our own memories. We can only promise that the following description is accurate in the moments when it matters. We take no responsibility for the embellishments added thereafter. Plans for the chlorophyll library were drafted toward the end of the 21st century by a star architect unsatisfied with the low-hanging, zero-emissions fruit. And from the beginning, he set the project behind by taking 2 years to draft a design that maximized the amount of natural light through ingenious angles and mirrors, coaxed heat from the hot throat of the earth through geothermal vents, recycled rainwater via a series of increasingly complex intestinal gutters, and leveraged the insulation provided by the cliffs into which it was built. The result was a building that, when viewed head-on, looked like an oak leaf sticking straight up from the ground, its 3-lobed steeple sheathed in rows of solar panels, each one able to bank and tilt independently, depending on the changing angle of the sun. A wall of glass made visible the cellular structure of hallways, stacks, reading rooms, and staff offices. The overall effect forced onlookers to gaze up at the maze of veined corridors branching off from the center lift. Like cathedrals hewn from the rock of past centuries, it sometimes inspired literary pilgrims to drop to their knees and weep in awe. Others were made to feel very small and important in its shadow, an unlikely but intentional combination capable of outsized impact on the world. But we'll come to them in due time. Everyone was welcome to enter for research or study, and in fulfilling these needs, it worked just like any other library. The reader entered, the reader located the book they required, the reader sat down at one of the long curved tables and softly turned pages. But at some point between the opening of the book and its return to the shelf, another process started up, one which fed on the attention lavished by library patrons on the books they perused. In most libraries, the major exchange that took place involves the infusion of new ideas, words, and feelings into readers through books. But inside the chlorophyll library, reading changed books, actually altered the printed words. In only one sitting, a reader might turn back to the first page and find it wholly changed from what they'd read that morning. I think I'm up for time, so I'll stop there. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Callum. I think reading books out loud also changes books. So thank you for reading to us. Liza Faktor is a visual artist and independent curator. Her practice is informed by how the memories and traumas of humans and the land are intertwined, how we and landscapes process violence, and how we might heal. Her image making is connected with her engagement with other artists and communities, and is heavily influenced by collaboration with advocates, scientists, research, and travel. Faktor's work has been exhibited in Spain, Norway, Russia, the UK, and the US, and is in private collections around the world. She is the recent recipient of a 2023 Oregon Regional Arts and Culture Council grant and an Oregon Arts Commission Career Opportunity Grant in 2022. She has curated over 20 exhibitions, lectured and taught workshops in Europe, the US, the UK, Brazil, and Australia. And tonight we are so pleased to have Liza Faktor here with us at Sitka. It's raining kind of heavily on and off on the coast. So wherever you are, you have to make extra joyful noise so we can hear you. Please help me welcome Liza Faktor to Sitka.
Thank you, Alison, for such a kind introduction. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for Sitka for having me, especially to Ford Family Foundation to funding my Golden Spot residency, because it's crucial for me to be in this magic forest for my project about forest ecosystems. I moved to Pacific Northwest about 6 years ago, but I didn't really start relating to the landscape until I had a tectonic health event that happened 3 years ago and forced me to reassess my practice. And as a result of this, I started going into the forest because instinctively I tried to ground myself and to relate to the landscapes that I chose to live in. And I felt that I was entering the forest for the first time, and I'm not talking about any forest. I'm talking about all-growth temperate rainforest, which is typical for Pacific Northwest, and where you feel that your brain chemistry changes after a certain time of being here. So I decided to start a conscious inquiry in these forest ecosystems. One of the first things that I encountered was this thing that I saw at human-made Detroit Lake in Oregon in the middle of the winter when the water level recedes. You can see the locked ancient forest. And this encounter began for me this inquiry. And pretty much after this, I came up with the title After Us, because I was wondering which shape will leave the planet after us, or perhaps our species will change for the better. So I went down the rabbit hole of research as I was trying to understand what's happening with climate emergency and specifically with forests. I leave this beautiful quote from Wallace Wells, one of the books that I found very inspiring. Initially, I was overwhelmed by everything that I read about climate emergency and with the speed with which we are losing species. And I saw a lot of devastation in our forests. For those of you who are not from here, the whole history of the Pacific Northwest and Oregon territory is rooted in extraction of ancient forests. This is the image of logging of wildfire scarred forest in Willamette National Forest. And because especially rural communities are still dependent on timber industry, this subject is very sensitive here. And I became interested at how to have a meaningful conversation about the challenges this forest and its species are facing, with people that have different view on the forest. This is an image of clear cut on private land with this magical view of Mackenzie River. And there's a lot of remnants of logging of ancient forest. This is an old logging bridge from 19th century left to rot in the forest. And of course, logging is not only human disturbances that are threatening the habitat of species. Another one is target shooting. If you frequent the forest, even the protected forest close to residences, you can encounter a lot of shooting, and here's a constant sound of target practice, and even find the whole parties of practice. And I was starting to wonder how it feels to be a non-human living in these woods with this constant disturbance. And of course, other natural disturbances is wildfires that are ravaging in our region with growing intensity because of the climate change and because of the forest mismanagement for the last over 100 years. And I began to question myself how to communicate this creatively from the point of view of species, especially the endangered ones. And of course, the most famous phrase is "stop it all." I had no intention to photograph them in the wild because I'm not a nature photographer, and also I have no desire of disturbing them further. And I thought of sound. I heard about bioacoustics research in other regions, and I made a point of finding a lab that is doing this in Pacific Northwest, and I was lucky to find joint OSU U.S. Forest Service Predator Prey Lab in Calvaris. They are doing the amazing bioacoustic research, and they surveil over 200 species. And I'm going to play you a little clip of Spotty All Do It. They were kind enough to agree to collaborate, and they gave me access to their database. And I invited the amazing composer and sound artist Marcus Fisher to work with me and to create a soundscape based on these sounds, and also on the sounds of logging and other disturbances. I also started to take pictures in the museums of taxonomy, and this is a small museum, Pioneer Museum in Tillamook, and you can encounter this impossible meeting a species with you can see brown bear and bison looking at the Arctic birds and at marbled murrelet, another endangered species in Pacific Northwest. I'm fascinated by the beauty of undisturbed forests. Most of them protected. These pictures are from the coastal forest, from here that I made in previous visit, and from Cape Falcon. And this is actually made in the Portland area. Is ancient forest section in Eagle Thorn Park. And also I was lucky to watch a lot of inspiring regeneration of the forest. Like this is a Mount Hood National Forest recovering from the river site fire. And this is just what they call the dawn chorus of birds. And it was so full of life and of birds singing. And you couldn't even see the devastation anymore. So my goal is, other than create immersive artworks that we're going to complete with markers and show it in the art spaces, I want to create a curative experience for patients in the hospitals and for disabled communities based on my own experience as a patient, for people that cannot engage with us, some perspective on our state as humans from the point of view of species that are going to extinction due to our intervention with their lives. So being in this forest gives me strength and imagination how to engage with the forest and with the community meaningfully. This last image is from Cascade Head that I made in my previous trip. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa, for sharing your work and inviting your bird collaborators into the talk as well. It was magical to hear them. Thank you so much. Nathan Huey is a resident graduate of the Biostatistics Department at Harvard University, where he spent years building statistical tools leading to the discovery of novel genetic markers of breast cancer for his dissertation on inference in high-dimensional settings via desparsifying techniques with applications in genomics. In 2021, he was awarded a research fellowship from the Harvard Kennedy School's Arctic Initiative to study the intersection of Western science and indigenous knowledge systems. He collaborates in this endeavor with several members of the Sami reindeer herding people in northern Norway. He is passionate about quantitative ecology, indigenous knowledge systems, and local foraging. An Ohio native, Nathan currently lives and works at the Sloth Institute in Quepos, Costa Rica. Please make enough noise to wake a sloth and help me welcome Nathan Huey to the Sitka Center.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thanks to everyone, and it's really an honor to be here in residency at Sitka. Today, I'm probably going to just share, or I am just going to share a little bit about the work that I've been doing in Costa Rica. This is not really what I'm working on here at Sitka, but this is where I live and work right now, is in Quepos, Costa Rica, at a place called the Sloth Institute. So today I am an ecologist. I am trained in biostatistics specifically. So for something completely different from what we've been hearing so far. I'm going to talk a little bit about machine learning and sort of what that is, what I do as a quantitative ecologist, and reflect a little bit about the structure of reality, the structure of the world, and why quantitative tools can be helpful for the future. So let's dive in. So this kind of harkens to the talk that we just heard with respect to the lovely bird sounds that we were hearing. I don't know if anyone has ever used these apps here, this iNaturalist app or the Merlin app from Cornell. These are apps that you can have on your smartphone. You're walking around outside, let's say you're on a trail or something, and you see a plant that you don't know what it is. You can take a picture of it, and these apps can kind of give you an idea of what kind of species those might be. For Merlin, you can record bird sounds, and then their app kind of gives you a prediction of what the different species could be that make that call. So you may have wondered, this is like kind of magic, right? So how do these work? Well, this is really involved with machine learning and biomimicry. In fact, the models, some of the most popular models, these quantitative models that are used for these kinds of applications are called neural networks, interestingly enough, because they're based foundationally in the architecture of the human brain, the human nervous system. So on the left-hand side, you can see a graphic showing a bunch of nerve cells all connected together. Very, very complicated intertwining systems where all of these different cellular components, these living components, are all talking to each other in some sense. On the right-hand side, you see a very common, in my field, a very common diagram in machine learning literature. And this is what is called an artificial neural network. Each one of these dots here represents a simple, we call it actually a neuron. And it's a simple mathematical formula, just a little equation. But as you can see, there's multiple layers of these. They're all stacked in different places, but they're all talking to each other. This seeks to mimic the complexity going on in the human brain. Now, this is a huge topic, but I just wanted to sort of introduce you all to it if you haven't heard of it before. So what happens is that picture data or sound data, which can be transferred into numbers, can be represented in this quantitative way. This data is fed into the very beginning, this input layer of neurons, and they're all talking to each other. This information is passed, modified, modeled a little bit differently. And at the very end, that's where these predictions come from. And it might say, oh, this bird song corresponds to a robin or a chickadee or whatever it might be. So at this point, I just wanted to take a little bit of a detour because one thing that I'm taking a lot of time to think about here personally is the structure of reality and what this quantitative reasoning means. It's one of the reasons I really love being here at Sitka is because as a quantitative scientist, it's really a joy and it's really a blessing to be around, first of all, this beautiful place, but also people who are thinking in non-quantitative ways. Because although I do believe that the universe is beating the same heart, at my experience, human beings tend to be looking for, or the human mind tends to look for differences, patterns, quantities, changes. And so I just want to invite everyone to meditate on this seeming quantitative structure of reality and what it might mean. Not saying that it represents some sort of truth about the world, some capital T truth, as I say here, but reflecting on how it is proven to be a powerful tool in the practice of ecology through time. So with that being said, I work at the Sloth Institute, so I should probably show you some pictures of sloths. This sloth here is, her name is Princess Leia. So how can machine learning help sloths? So despite their popularity, it's interesting, but in Costa Rica, at least, there are relatively few rehabilitation centers that are specialized in treating these animals. Partially, one of the reasons that it's difficult to treat sloths is because they're very good at hiding their injury and their illness. This is in line with their general life strategy of not calling much attention to themselves. This is the first sort of thing that I'll be talking about. And the second is, unfortunately, many sloths are taken from their natural habitat for the selfie trade. And I want to take this opportunity to just call people's attention to the selfie trade, and especially with sloths. It's very natural for a lot of people to say, "Oh, I'd love to have my picture with the sloth. I'd love to hold it," but that's actually quite detrimental to them, especially because it encourages their being taken from their natural environment. So it's important when a rehabilitation center encounters a sloth like this, that is rescued from a situation like this, to return them to where they actually grew up, but it can be difficult. So this is another problem that we would like to be able to solve with these more advanced machine learning algorithms. So the first project that I'm working on at the Sloth Institute in Costa Rica, as we're looking at a little picture of a sloth named Elsa here, a three-fingered sloth. So we're building tools, these machine learning tools, to predict health status of sloths based on biometric measurements. So when a sloth comes in, we'll take measurements of how long it is, what its weight is, the length of its nails on both its front and back appendages, the number of moths that are living in its fur, all these sort of suite of health measurements. And then what I'm trying to do right now is I'm building a tool that takes in all of this data and then spits out a prediction of whether the sloth is healthy or not, because it's very difficult to know, as I just mentioned. And right now, I have a model that is doing about 80% accuracy. So I'm hoping pretty soon to validate that and to make it public to different rehabilitation centers in Costa Rica and potentially around the world. The second thing is more akin to these iNaturalist apps in Maroon, is image classification. So you take a picture of some sort of animal or plant, and then you get a prediction about what it is. So excellent models already do exist for the classification of species based on image. And our goal, this is in line with the trying to solve the issue of relocating sloths back to their homes or their origins. The goal is to build a model where you can take a picture of a sloth, a rehabilitated sloth, and it will have predictions about where in the country or where in the world it originated from. This is going to be an ongoing project. So where I decided to start for this project was building an image classifier, not for birds, not for plants, not for mammals in general, but just for sloths. And the two types of sloths that we encounter where I am in Costa Rica are two-fingered and three-fingered sloths. And the two-fingered sloth you can see here on the left-hand side, and a three-fingered sloth on the right-hand side. You can see that they look pretty different. So this first building of this classifier, this image classifier, is sort of a proof of concept that that machines can do a pretty good job about learning of what the sloths look like. So I just recently finished that project. The URL for that is shown there if anyone wants to play with that. This is live online. So right now, this classifier is still in the beta version, so it has some improvements to be made, but it's doing rather well. So this is a good stepping stone for that larger project. Right now, this classifier only works with the labels of two and three-fingered sloths. So as I've told some people in the past, if you want to know whether this model thinks that you're a two or a three-fingered sloth, you can upload a picture of yourself or your friends and see what it thinks about you. So finally, I just want to talk a little bit about the future goals that I have. I just finished my PhD in May, so I've been taking this time as well to think a lot about what my trajectory, what I would like the trajectory to be of the career that I'm starting on. So that is leveraging this enormous wealth of data we have today to conserve, protect, heal, and inform this world, acknowledging the whole time, acknowledging that this way of knowing that I'm trained in doesn't represent an optimal way of knowing in any way, but also listening, assisting, and collaborating with communities of First Peoples with deeper roots in space and time. And I'll just briefly mention here at the end, my project here at the Sitka Center is working on this collaborative project with a few members of the Sami indigenous reindeer herding tribe in northern Norway. And we're creating a podcast together discussing the intersection of the Western ways, the Western science and traditional ways of knowing in their community, as well as just what it's like to be a reindeer herder. So I hope to make that available to people as well relatively soon. So thank you so much for coming today.
Nathan, there's a clarifying question in the chat. Did you say that you're counting how many moths, M-O-T-H-S, are living in their fur as an indicator of health?
Yes, that's a good question. I kind of briefly said that there are the fur of a sloth is a very interesting ecosystem because sloths move so slowly that a whole very lively and varied ecosystem exists on sloths, including moths that only live on sloths. And it is an indicator of, can be an indicator of health. And right now I'm trying to leverage some of that information on the number of moths on a sloth for its health as well. It is really fascinating.
It can't just be me. Moths on Sloths has got to be my favorite unborn Dr. Seuss book ever. Thank you so much. Sabina Haque creates multimedia art installations to explore transformations of place and identity. Raised in Karachi, Pakistan by American and Pakistani parents, Haque has spent half her life in America. Collaboration with BIPOC youth and immigrant communities of color is a vital part of Haque's practice. She has partnered with Asian Pacific American Network of Oregon, Africa House, and schools in East Portland to facilitate civic engagement through art. This work was curated into the 2019 Portland Biennial. Haque received an MFA in painting from Boston University and teaches art at Portland State University in Oregon. She has received noted fellowships like the Oregon Arts Commission Individual Artist Fellowship. Past residency awards include Artist in Residence at Portland Archives and Record Center and the TEDx Artist in Residence program, as well as Sitka's own Jordan Schnitzer printmaking residency. Noted public collections include the Gordon Gilkey Print Center at Portland Art Museum, the Jordan Schnitzer Collection, and City of Portland's and Seattle's public portable arts collections. We are so pleased to have Sabina Haque back at Sitka. Please give her a warm Sitka welcome.
Thank you, Allison. So with that, my latest body of work, I have done a large number of different bodies of work, but this is, as Allison said, I try to create multimedia art installations exploring the transformation of place and identity. And my latest show just opened in October in Portland, the Waterstone Artist Run Gallery. It's called The New Abnormal. It's a painting installation reflecting the climate crisis in the two places that I call home, Oregon and Pakistan. So you see here is an installation. On one side, I have paintings creating a kind of a climate portal linking the 2020 Labor Day fires, specifically in Otis, and which is a mile from here, and Detroit, Oregon, to the catastrophic flooding in Pakistan in the summer of 2022. My sister and my parents lived there, and 35 million people were displaced and 1 million homes were destroyed. So I wanted to make a connection between the two communities that affect my day-to-day living. And you can see here in the center of the installation, I created these transparencies based off of images that friends and family and media had sent me. So these are layered and mounted back to back on a clear acrylic block. And so the image from one side, the Pakistan side, bleeds into the other side, the Oregon side. Here you can see families and women holding onto a rope in knee-deep flood water, being evacuated from their villages in the province of Sindh. You can see their beautiful kurtas, which are embroidered with mirror work. And then on the other side, you can see bleeding through the flames from the Beachy Creek fire near Detroit. We saw the lake. We also know that that area, including Otis, during Labor Day fires, we had this huge wind that came through and destroyed over 2,000 structures right here, or 1,200 structures right here in Otis, and burned a lot of forest. It was one of the worst fires in Oregon. So moving to the second slide. So I made paintings, and the images that you saw that were installed in the center of the gallery were a starting point for the paintings. And you can see this is almost a 4-foot by 5-foot. It shows the awesome and crazy fire imaginary portal, or before, or maybe a place in the future. And so I became really interested in this idea of the painted world becoming a formation and for connection with our imagination. You can see here a bed floating. It's called a charpai, floating on some rubber. And what happened during 2022, 8 inches a day in July, August, September, October, we had monsoon rains, a deluge, and they never stopped. So you can see people's homes, sessions are brightly colored and kind of hovering above this landscape of very tumultuous water. You can see here a transparency. What I'm doing here with the belongings, and it specifically didn't want the figure to appear in the paintings, but actually the belongings become personified as the cultural heritage, the resilience, because these folks are still rebuilding their homes and trying to find a way forward. And on the back side, you can see bleeding through here are the homes in Salem, and you can see the sky is almost a bright orange. You're going to see that in the next painting, which is the skies of Salem. This is called Red Sky Salem. And my sister sent me this photograph of our home in Karachi, kind of like a moat where everything was surrounded in water. And like I said, 1/3 of the country was covered in water, or some kind of water, and people were trying to find a way forward. And, you know, ironically, the climate is warming. And so on one side of the planet is 14,000 miles away, you're getting so much moisture that it's raining. On the other side, it's causing this drying and heat, and then these fires are spreading. It's a kind of, it's very sort of like interesting to see that visual difference in the type of climate that's manifesting. If you see closely here, there is a woman pushing her chest of belongings, and that reappears here like a jewel kind of floating through this morass of water, and then all the gas guzzlers kind of dropping into the muddy water. You can also see on the backside the Oregon window, and you can see the chair and the destruction of a home in Detroit Lake area and Brighton Bush area, and that reappears in these paintings. By the way, these paintings that's a 3-foot by 3-foot, so you're 6 feet wide diptychs. The Pakistan side was 6 feet wide as well. You can see that these paintings hold both destruction, but they also are a site for renewal. And on one side, the window becomes a point of regeneration. There's also these fire followers, which are called poppies, and they have they germinate actually during the smoke for forest fires. You can see them also in the screen of the car, so they basically emerge through there. So there's this sense of holding both spaces, memorializing the site, but also finding a path forward. in Pakistan, there was this remarkable thing that happened because the landscape basically became all watery and the land was not available. And so the insects went into the trees, and this is a natural phenomenon. They actually cocoon the trees to create safety and to stay alive. So these webs were made by spiders and moths and all kinds of insects. And you can see here, this piece is called Cocoon Safety and Sheltering in the Trees in this really watery landscape. So this is a site photograph right here in Otis. There was a huge, there was about 40 mobile homes and then multiple other homes on Echo Mountain Road that were completely destroyed the night of the Labor Day fires. And so I worked with this painting to create this, it's called Regeneration. And there's the trillium, and there's also this rare tulip that the University of Oregon is actually working to grow right up here on the Cascade Head. It's supposed to attract the silver spotted butterfly. So I'm looking at the flora and fauna of this area to kind of reinsert it into these invented landscapes. And I'm really interested in working with, while I'm here, Norma Jean was connected to me. She's a crisis responder throughout the fires and helped work with survivors. So I want to record at least 4 stories. We're even in touch right now identifying folks. So hopefully that'll happen in the month while I'm here. And then, I think I want to end with this last painting that is called Monsoon in Manhattan. It is, when I painted in the summer, it was prior to the flooding in Brooklyn, but it is based on the rising sea levels. I'm actually collaging in elements of the Indus River into, Times Square, and then there's these rains that are coming down. Part of the goal of this was that to really never forget we're all interconnected in this world, and this is a fragile moment for all of us, and we have to take responsibility. I think some of the frontline communities and climate change there's so many things that we're dealing with in Pakistan, like also all over. It's exasperating, all the economic issues, cultural and political issues in the region. So we have to be really engaged, and we also have to create possibility. And so that is kind of where I'm thinking about these screens, the layering, the metaphor of the window as a way to challenge us and to prepare us for the impossible by using our imagination. So thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to end. Okay.
Sabina, such powerful work. Thank you so much for bringing it and sharing it with us this evening.
Thank you.
Our final presenter this evening is Isabelle Hayeur. Hayeur is known for her photographs and her experimental videos. Her work is situated within a critical approach to the environment, urban development, and to social conditions. Since the late 1990s, she has been probing the territories she goes through to understand how our contemporary civilizations take over and fashion their environments. She has exhibited internationally and has also participated in artist residencies. Her artwork can be found in numerous public and private collections. Isabelle was first in residence at Sitka in spring 2019, just a few months after I joined the organization. So it is a personal joy to have her back with us. Please make some joyful noise as we welcome Isabelle Hayeur back to Cascade Head and Sitka.
Thank you, Allison, and thanks everyone. It's so good to be back here. So I'll be showing one of my projects. Okay, so it's a underwater photography project. So I use a underwater camera housing, and I simply put my 35mm camera inside it. This project was mostly developed during artist residency across the US, and it has evolved over the years. I've been exploring different issues and experimenting with the camera. I have taken shots in various lakes, rivers, swamps, and in the sea. I have documented the Florida Keys, the Louisiana bayous, the Gulf of Mexico, the New York Bay, and other areas. Most of the time I take my photograph in shallow water. Sometimes I do snorkeling or I use a boat. Here I was in the Everglades. And here it's near Staten Island in one of the largest Navy graveyards. This research is related to my personal experiences because I have lived by the shore of a river that became really polluted. And my intention was to create artworks that probe our relation to water to underscore its vital importance. Here we can see a work from 2011. It was taken in the river where I grew up. That's another one from the same river. This is one of my favorite, and it was created in 2015. The title is Spirogyra. So Spirogyra is a common name from the green algae that form slimy patches in ponds and stagnant water. When you see them first, they can be unattractive, but from under the water, they are quite magical. This work was taken in the Mississippi River in Louisiana in 2013. We can see troubled waters, sediments, and plastic pollution. This is another work taken in the Mississippi, and we see one of the many boats. There's so much traffic and noise on this river. That's another work taken in Louisiana. This time it's the Mississippi River Gulf Outlet Canal, what they call there Mr. Go. And it's a man-made waterway that is basically a shortcut between New Orleans and the Gulf of Mexico. It was built in the 50s. It has created many problems. It has altered ecosystem in South Louisiana because it has disturbed the natural flow of the Mississippi River, and it created the salt intrusion. It has also become a funnel for tidal surge and hurricanes. So basically when storm arrive on the coast, all the marshland that used to stop the erosion just goes in the canal and hit cities. I also went to Florida on several occasions, and I have captured various aquatic plants, salt marshes, and intertidal wetlands. So this is a work from 2014, and the title is Limulus. So it's a horseshoe crab. So horseshoe crab, they are living fossils. They have been around for more than 100 million years. What we can see here is just a shell of one of them. They are harmless, and often they get beached when they come ashore. And you can help them by flipping them so they can go back to the ocean. So the 3 other images, they have been taken in Florida on Captiva Island. All these images, they're all large format. Sometimes they're like 20 inches long and 50 inches wide. And I use a computer imaging software to stitch multiple images together so we have a wider view. So I do the above and below. Like, for example, in this images, there are 3 images stitches together, like the bottom, the middle part, and the top part. And sometimes I have to rework a little bit. And sometimes I do horizontal panorama. So I use like 5 different views that I stitch together. So this is another view taken in Florida. That was in Key West. It's in a canal. So in Florida, I was especially interested in mangroves because they are well adapted to harsh environment and to sea level fluctuation. They contribute to ecological resilience by filtering the water and by providing better protection to coast. Here I really focused on the roots. I find them very fascinating. The root system is so complex. And the 2 following works, they're almost abstract. And this is something I like to do with the camera. I experiment with all the randomly what the sediments are creating. This is mangrove roots, and we see the surface of water at the top. So this is another more experimental work with algae. This one was taken in the St. Lawrence River, and it's a plant, very common algae called Fucus vesiculosus, and it's very common on the East Coast. And here we see Fucus gordoni, or rockweed, and it was photographed in the Salmon River. The following works were all done when I was an artist in residence the first time at Sitka, and the picture were taken at Devil Punch Bowl State Natural Area, so it's not too far from here, and there's a lot of tidal pools, so it's easy to get in the water safely. This is on Sitka campus. It's a Crawley Creek. And here we have another view of Crawley Creek in the morning with the morning light. It's quite magical there. And this is one of my favorite. It was taken in a pond on the Sitka property. And the newts were mating. There were a lot of newts, and they were really easy to photograph because they would come basically to the camera. They didn't matter that I was there or not. And we see also the eggs. So these are my last picture that I've done last year in Florida. I went to Crystal River to swim with the manatees. They're very gentle and adorable animals. It was a great experience, very contemplative and meditative too. So this is another image. It's the same manatee. It was a young manatee. And they're very curious. They're not afraid of you. And that's the last one. And we can see his eyes. And they don't see very well, but they have these sensors on their back, and they know exactly where you are, even if they don't see very well. So this is how they see in water, basically. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabelle, for sharing your work and including some of the images from Sitka. I'll just share personally, Isabelle is extremely generous with Sitka in allowing us to use her photography with credit. And it's impossible to know exactly how what leads to what, but I have a strong suspicion that because we have been able to use Isabelle's photographs, it's one of the most important things that has helped attract so many highest caliber artists and ecologists, and especially people who are working at the most interesting interdisciplinary edges and intersections. I don't know exactly how everyone finds their way, but Isabelle, I feel very strongly that your photographs have helped create and invite everyone who's been a part of this show today in one way or another. So just so grateful and pleased to have you end the show tonight. So thank you to Isabelle, Sabina, Nathan, Liza, and Callum for taking us inside your work and in each in your own way in helping us all have a wider view. Thank you to the Sitka community for joining us and making Sitka's residents feel so welcome. But wish you all good night and look forward to seeing many of you back on November 30th for our next resident talk. Good night, everyone.